Let's move on to the next category. If we can have the next slide. And that's the question of, is storytelling changing? So as my fictional IP owner, I've worked out some of the platform challenges, but what about narrative? What does storytelling mean in a world where kids are watching everything from 6-second vines to Minecraft tutorials to unboxing videos to SpongeBob to Twitch? And for the spark for this, the video spark for this, we've asked Michael Polis, who's actually here tonight from Atomic Toy Box, to respond to something that I heard. This was actually someone from the DreamWorks TV YouTube channel saying. So he was asked about the duration of stories for YouTube. And he said the ideal YouTube video length, as long as it takes. So I asked Michael to respond to how liberating is it for storytellers and development executives not to have some of the strictures that they used to have of the 15 or 30-minute content or 30-minute or 1-hour content, and how that affects distribution and marketing. Can we roll Michael Polis's video?
The only reason comic books are in the size and shape that they are is because when you take a broadsheet and fold it a couple of times, you have a format. It was something that was customary that they already had inventory on and figured out an easy way to manipulate it into a new format. Right now, we're in a bit of the Wild West where there are different opportunities to have all kinds of formats available. And it is somewhat liberating. It's definitely liberating not to be restricted to a particular minute page count or whatever that format restriction is. So it provides opportunity. What it also does is it makes it a little bit difficult in that if you're trying to sell a show internationally or sell a show to traditional media, they need those breaks. They need the format to work in a specific way. So I still think we're at a point where we need those licenses, those license fees from broadcast in order to produce content and amortize our costs. There are certainly opportunities with big companies like Netflix or an Amazon or an HBO who can take the content and produce it for their own broadcast platform without requiring any commercial break. But if we're going to sell that content for terrestrial media or any other commercial media, they're probably going to require it. So we're not there yet. We're not in a space, and I don't know if we're ever going to get to a space entirely, with perhaps the exception of feature films, where there isn't going to be some sort of requirement for format and length.
So Michael's brought us to an interesting point here, which is that there's a woman named Lisa Guernsey who's one of the best writers about children and media, and she talks about content, context, and the individual child. Michael's brought us to context. In the days when I worked at PBS many years ago, and we were crafting schedules for brand consistency, for flow, for through the course of an evening, kids are watching video content in a completely different context now. With SVOD or with YouTube, a kid can make some pretty big content leaps, whether on purpose or by accident. So how should that affect the kind of liberating structures that Michael is talking about, but trying to put it into a context that's going to be appropriate and understandable for a child?
I think the data points to a lot of that. So we were talking earlier how you can instantly, as a content creator, see where people drop off, see what reaction is. Even though there's a lot of freedom on length and what you can do, especially on a channel like a YouTube, you learn where your audience is at. You learn where your content and the way you tell a story is at. So a lot of the regular shows that happen on YouTube actually do follow a very set type of programming time frame within it. So it's more of a self-regulated piece of content that's really being kind of hammered that way based on how the audience is responding. So it's really happening within that piece more so than by executive.
So I think that's exactly right. And what to me is what the revolutionary part of this is that you can develop your content on the very platform on which you're distributing it. So, which is, I think, a major game changer for everybody who's creates content and and trying to understand what an audience likes and doesn't like and all of the stuff that we need to know in order to deliver the best content. But this is a platform whereby, as you were saying, you can see where your audience checks out, see where they check in, what they like, what they don't like immediately. You can change it. You can depending obviously on your format, but you can have a format that is 1 minute, 30 seconds long and works great because it's the content that fits that. You can have a gamer who has 40-minute episodes that everybody watches all the way through just because of the way in which that engagement works. And if it's not working, it's so much easier to just say, I'm going to make an 11-minute episode and see how that goes, right? I mean, it's incredibly free. It is also, as Michael was saying, scary as all hell, right? Especially
scary.
if you're trying to, distribute on other platforms too.
For us, I think it has a lot to do with the complexity of the storytelling. So, something like a classic cartoon that is more visual and not as dialogue heavy, the shorter format tends to work better. For something that is simple and character driven, but the world is a little bigger, the 11-minute format tends to work for that. Something that is a more complex story, it just kind of gets deeper and deeper and longer as you go, and it depends. And if you have a long format and a simple story, you might not have enough to engage your audience for that time. So, I think the flexibility is absolutely liberating, and it's wonderful. And I think, we're seeing it too. We're having conversations about how long's a movie for us. Right. 44 minutes, 68 minutes, 90 minutes. Like, we had this conversation today, and it was fascinating. I don't think we have the answer to that, which is, upsets the movie guy, but, it was really interesting. It's like the whole new world that we're in.
Oh, no, it is kind of crazy. Sometimes I'll spend all this time and I work on this amazing video that I think is so, so good. I'm so excited about it. And then no one really likes it. And I'm like, I put all this effort into this. I'm so frustrated. And then the next day I post a video straight from my iPhone, no editing, poor lighting. They love it. They're like so excited. It gets like 1 million views. And I'm just like shaking my head. So it really, the thing with YouTube is, it is trial, it is error, and the best part about it is a conversation. So instead of wondering what I should post, I don't even think anymore. I just ask them, like, what do you guys want to see today? Guess what? Everybody wants to see a cooking video, so that's what I post. So it really allows you to have this conversation and really find out what they actually want.
I think exactly what you're saying about, like, get to know your audience and ask them directly about what they know. And to an extent, it's trial and error. But at the same point, now I'm going to put my academic hat on, when we think about context, we really can break it down and be able to really measure, working with different different properties, not only what do people know when they're coming? Are they new to your programming or not? Who are they socializing with? Are they watching it alone? Are they watching it with their friends? And then in regards to context, I'm so tired of the word context, because context is so big, right? It covers so many different things. So the way we break it up is to 3 states: a state of mind, a state of time, and a state of place. And every one of these can be tracked using big data, which is what we're doing. You can actually look at time in regards to, are they binge viewing it and watching every one of your shows one after the other? Are they watching it at a certain time because their cousin loves your programming too, and they're in Eastern Standard Time and we're Pacific Standard Time, and that's one way that they're telecocooning with each other? And there's place. It's like going home or not, or mood. You have wearables now, and we haven't even tapped into that. And there's so many opportunities with wearables of, like, if I'm in a bad mood, I'm totally going and watching your shows because you're going to make me laugh, and that matters.
That's true. You even read the comments when people be like, wow, I really had a bad day, but I came here and watched a video and it made me happy. So I think for a lot of us YouTubers and content creators, that's what you strive for.
But context is interesting too, especially in some formats like gaming, where, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, where a lot of these videos are an hour long, and they're not just one. They're like, here's me going through the entire Pokemon game, and there's 26 versions. They're all an hour long. I have twin 8-year-old boys, and they could if I didn't stop them, watch every single one, because the reality is that it's not so much storytelling. They feel like they're playing the video game, kind of like what we were talking about with the unboxing piece. And so, it is that context of what is that content and what does it make you feel and how are you kind of experiencing that. It's fascinating to see.
So, good.
I mean, as all of us have mentioned, kids today are so much smarter, so much more sophisticated. They're so much more aware of themes that, 10 years ago were considered sort of adult themes of what's happening in the world, which I think is to many degrees changing the storytelling. I think another element that we're seeing at Stylehaul is that the definition for a little girl 10 years ago, her kind of first introduction to her role model was the idea of the princess, sort of this passive character that waited to be saved by the prince coming on a white horse. Today's girls, they want to be the savior. They want to be kind of, the person that defines their own destiny. And I think, again, so much of the storytelling that you see, whether it's in Nickelodeon programming or Disney programming or what we create for Stylehaul, is kind of that shift in the dynamic for children and their savviness.
We are running really late, and I want to make sure that we have time for audience questions, but I want to do another 30-second answer just before we go to the next category. And that is, it sounds like a lot of what's happening now is not just in response to changing technology, but is in response to what kids have been looking for a long time. If YouTube had not come along, would someone have had to invent it in the traditional sense to respond to what kids want from media?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I'd say, I'd say yes. Also, there would need to be that kind of outlet, and kids are more participatory. Kids are creators. They're more in command. We watched great movie, the Lego Movie, and it's not like at the end of the movie you just shut it off. At the end of the movie, I look over and they say, okay, now it's time to make our Lego movie. Let's go get our Legos and use the camera and do stop animation, and that's just natural, and that's also great. So yeah, I think perhaps, but that it's just the kind of mindset of kids today, which is great.
I think if somebody else out here didn't create it, they would create it themselves. So eventually, it would have to happen.
Exactly what I was.
I'm thankful YouTube created it.
Yay! Thanks, you too.